They say betrayal hurts most when it comes from people who watched you grow. From people who smiled at you across polished boardroom tables while quietly sharpening knives under the surface. The morning they voted me out, they believed they were erasing me. What they didn't realize was that I had already mastered the game they thought they owned. When security escorted me out of the building my father built, they smiled with satisfaction, convinced they had won. This is the story of how they were wrong. My name is Alexandra Pierce, and until 6 months ago, I believed blood still meant something in business. At 34, I was the only child of Daniel Pierce, founder of Pierce Biodynamics, a biotech company that changed the way early-stage cancer diagnostics were detected and treated. To the public, my father was a visionary. To the industry, he was relentless. To me, he was the man who taught me that leadership was earned, not inherited. I grew up in laboratories instead of playgrounds, learned the smell of ethanol before perfume, and understood the language of clinical trials before I learned algebra. When other kids had babysitters, I had postdoc researchers keeping an eye on me while my father worked late, driven by a mission that went far beyond profit. "You can't lead what you don't understand," he used to say, adjusting his glasses with a tired smile. "So learn everything." I did. Yes, I went to Harvard Business School. But I also spent summers in shipping warehouses, tracking inventory by hand with men who had been with the company since the beginning. I rotated through R&D, running essays beside PhDs who didn't hide their resentment toward the founder's daughter until I proved I could design experiments, not just observe them. I worked sales, marketing, operations, regulatory compliance. I knew the company from the inside out. When I was appointed Chief Operating Officer at 32, it wasn't nepotism. It was inevitability. The board applauded that day. They toasted the future of Pierce Biodynamics. Among them sat my stepfather, Richard Hale, who married my mother 3 years after her divorce from my father. There was Margaret Liu, my father's so-called oldest friend from Stanford. Thomas Garrett, the silver-tongued investor who helped take us public. They smiled, raised their glasses, and congratulated me on stepping into leadership. My father died on a Tuesday. A heart attack. At his desk. Reviewing data for an immunotherapy protocol he believed could change everything. The coroner said it was instant. No pain. I found him myself, arriving early to prepare for a quarterly forecast meeting. His coffee was still warm. The funeral passed in a blur of black suits and practiced condolences. Richard held my mother's arm and whispered promises about honoring Daniel's legacy. The board members lined up, gripping my hand, each vowing unwavering support. "We'll protect what he built," Margaret told me, tears in her eyes. 3 weeks later, they showed me what those words were worth. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Routine, or so I believed. I walked in carrying my laptop and my father's old pen, the one he always used for signing major decisions. Richard was seated at the head of the table. My father's chair. His expression was different. Cold. Calculated. No one met my eyes. "Alexandra," Richard began, voice heavy with manufactured concern. "We need to discuss your future with the company." My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "My future is here. I'm the COO." Thomas shuffled papers unnecessarily. "The board has concerns about your readiness for senior leadership." I laughed, sharp and brittle. "I've been here my entire life." Margaret interrupted. "Operational knowledge isn't the same as strategic gravitas. The market is volatile. Investors need someone seasoned. Someone who isn't me." Richard leaned forward. "The board has voted. Effective immediately, you'll be transitioned out. Generous severance. 6 months' salary. Time to grieve. To reflect." I looked around the table. 8 familiar faces. People who ate at our family table, who watched me grow up. Do you need security? I asked quietly. It's protocol, someone muttered. I stood, calm by force of will, slipped my father's pen into my pocket, and let them escort me through the building he built. Employees watched in stunned silence as I was marched out like a criminal. With every step, humiliation hardened into something sharper. They believed they had ended me. I drove straight to my father's grave. Sat in the car with the engine running, hands shaking, fury burning through my chest. Then I remembered his words. Emotion is data. Strategy requires clarity. That night, I hired a private investigator. I need everything, I told him. Every move they've made. Every lie. What he uncovered went far beyond betrayal. 6 months before my father's death, unusual stock activity began. Small blocks. Offshore accounts. Just under reporting thresholds. The pattern was subtle, but I recognized it immediately. It all traced back to Richard's personal attorney. Then came the emails. Encrypted messages between board members, dated while my father was still alive. Phase 1, Consolidation. Once DP is out of the picture, move quickly to sideline A before she can rally support. DP. My father. Out of the picture. Their endgame was clear. Sell the core research division to Apex Therapeutics, our biggest competitor. Strip the patents my father spent decades developing. Cash out. Golden parachutes for everyone. Daniel is too sentimental about legacy, Thomas wrote. Once we control the board, we maximize shareholder value. Corporate speak for gutting everything. Richard had promised Apex our immunotherapy pipeline in exchange for a board seat. Margaret was shorting our stock. It wasn't business. It was treason. Then I found my leverage. Buried in the bylaws. Section 47B. In the event of contested control, any shareholder or coalition controlling 75% of outstanding shares could reverse board decisions immediately. My father's estate gave me 22%. I needed 53 more. Impossible, they would have said. But I had truth. And I had people who still believed in my father's mission. Dr. Elaine Porter, head of oncology research, held 2%. A hospital pension fund held 3%. Employees with small stakes, people whose lives my father had changed. They thought they isolated me by throwing me out. What they really did was free me. That night, I made a list. Every shareholder. Every ally. Every person who remembered what Pierce Biodynamics stood for. I dialed the first number. Alexandra, Dr. Porter said immediately. I heard what they did. It's unforgivable. Then help me stop them, I replied. There was a pause. Tell me what you need. I smiled for the first time since the board meeting. The war had begun. Once the first ally said yes, momentum followed faster than I expected. My apartment became a war room. Whiteboards covered the walls. Names, percentages, connections. Green for confirmed allies. Yellow for undecided. Red for those too close to the board. Dr. Elaine Porter became my anchor. Her 2% wasn't just equity, it was credibility. Through her, I reached physicians, research directors, and hospital funds that had trusted my father's work for years. People who believed medicine existed to save lives, not to be flipped for quick profit. The hospital pension fund was cautious at first. Their manager met me at a quiet cafe, glancing around before speaking. The board says you're acting emotionally, he told me. That you're unstable after your father's death. I slid the emails across the table. His face drained of color. They're selling the oncology patents, he whispered. Apex will shelve half of this research. And raise prices on the rest, I said. Your patients will pay the cost. By the time we finished our coffee, his 3% was pledged to me, along with introductions to 2 other healthcare funds. Employees were harder to reach. The board was watching internal communications closely. So I met people where they lived their real lives. At the coffee shop across the street. At the gym. At their kids' soccer games. One by one, they told me the same thing. They said you abandoned us. And I told them the truth. They're planning to sell the company. You'll be gone next. A senior lab technician who'd worked with my father for 20 years handed over his proxy without hesitation. James Pierce wouldn't walk away, he said. Neither would his daughter. 3 weeks in, I had commitments for 51%. Close, but not enough. I needed 75. That's when an unexpected call changed everything. Ms. Pierce, the woman on the line said, voice cool and precise. This is Elena Volkov from North Star Capital. North Star held 7%. We've noticed unusual share movements around your company, she continued. And we don't appreciate being taken for granted. I knew what she meant. Richard had promised Apex that North Star would support the sale. We believe Pierce Biodynamics has long-term value, Elena said. But only under the right leadership. My father's 5-year plan, I replied without missing a beat. Personalized medicine. Community clinics. Expanded access. There was a pause. Then North Star stands with you. With North Star on board, the tide shifted. Smaller funds returned my calls. Early investors remembered my father's first prototype. Teachers' pension funds worried about governance. Each commitment turned another square on my wall green. The board noticed. Surveillance followed. The same car outside my building. Casual inquiries through mutual contacts. They were nervous. Good. At 8 weeks, I controlled 67% through ownership and binding proxies. Still short. So I changed tactics. I leaked just enough uncertainty to spook the market. Anonymous tips. Strategic disagreements at Pierce Biodynamics. Rumors of acquisition talks. The stock dipped. Nervous investors sold. I bought everything. Through shell companies. Through LLCs. Every dollar I had went in. I sold my car. Took the subway. Watched my percentage climb. 72. 74. Meanwhile, I gave the board a distraction. I incorporated a new company. Helios Biosystems. I let the rumor mill do the rest. Alexandra's starting a competitor. She's poaching researchers. None of it was true. But it didn't need to be. Fear does the work for you. Richard called me himself. This vendetta helps no one, he said. Sign a non-compete. We can improve your severance. I'm happy where I am, I replied calmly. Helios has exciting prospects. He took the bait completely. The board panicked. They accelerated talks with Apex, announcing a rushed shareholder vote to approve a strategic partnership. They thought they needed a simple majority. They believed they had it. They didn't know that several funds Apex counted on were already pledged to me. I waited 24 hours, just long enough for panic to spread, then filed my disclosure. 80.1%. The headline hit like a thunderclap. Founder's daughter takes controlling stake. Board faces coup. My phone exploded. I ignored every call except one. Hello, Richard, I said. We should discuss the agenda. 3 days later, the final piece fell into my lap. Frank Dalton, my father's first CFO, called from Napa. Your father never trusted Richard, he said. He asked me to keep records. Just in case. What he brought me was devastating. Embezzlement. Stock manipulation. A recorded conversation where Richard discussed waiting for my father to step aside. The evidence didn't just end careers. It opened criminal investigations. I timed everything carefully. The board needed to stay focused on the vote, not on prison. I leaked small irregularities. And second query here. A journalist asking questions there. Pressure applied precisely. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I laid out my suit. Deep blue. My father's favorite color. Armor. The morning of the vote, the building buzzed with tension. Cameras outside. Reporters shouting questions. I walked past them in silence. The security guard at the desk looked at me, then smiled. "Welcome back," he said quietly. The boardroom doors closed behind me. 8 faces stared back. Shock. Fear. Defiance. "You have no right to be here," Richard snapped. "Actually," I said, setting my briefcase down, "I have 80.3% of the company." The room erupted. I laid out the proxies. The evidence. The bylaws. Section 47B, my lawyer announced as she entered. Extraordinary shareholder meeting called. Board decisions reversed. Richard tried to threaten me. I slid the documents across the table. His deal with Apex. Margaret's short positions. Thomas's kickbacks. "The SEC receives this in 40 minutes, I said. "You can resign quietly, or we proceed publicly." One by one, they folded. Resignation letters signed with shaking hands. Security escorted them out. This time, not me. I sat in my father's chair. My chair. The company was mine again. Not as inheritance. As victory. We canceled the Apex deal. Restored the research budget. Protected the employees. The mission survived. That night, alone in the office, I wrote the letter. Pierce Biodynamics moves forward with integrity. I signed it with my father's pen. They thought they'd erased me. Instead, they created their own worst enemy. Because the best revenge isn't just winning. It's winning so completely that your enemies become footnotes in your story. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. What would you have done in my place? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who believes that betrayal doesn't end you. Sometimes, it forges you.